The big story, President Trump signing the bill that will inject more than $300 billion back into the Paycheck Protection Program to get money into the hands of small business owners to make sure they can keep employees on their payroll. He signed that bill just a few minutes ago. Of course, it made its way through the Senate and the House, making its way through the House yesterday. An interesting decision, though, by the only Democrat to vote against that bill, New York's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, saying that it doesn't do enough for common Americans and still remains questions on the front of what more funding will come for people trying to make rent. Here's what she had to say yesterday on the House floor.
It is a joke when Republicans say that they have urgency around this bill. The only folks that they have urgency around are folks like Ruth's Chris Steakhouse and Shake Shack. Those are the people getting assistance in this bill. You are not trying to fix this bill for mom and pops. And we have to fight to fund hospitals, fighting to fund testing. That is what we're fighting for in this bill. It is unconscionable.
All right, so there you go. A very outspoken AOC yesterday speaking out against that bill, and the only Democrat to vote against it. Of course, a lot of people are raising the point that may raise questions when it comes time for her reelection, of course, later this year. She does have a few opponents running against her, and one of those opponents joins us now, former CNBC anchor Michelle Caruso-Cabrera, a candidate for Congress's New York's 14th district in the Bronx and Queens. And MCC, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. You just heard an impassioned AOC speaking out against the new wave of funding. Of course, we've talked about how the first round of $350 billion was quickly exhausted by small businesses needing this money. What's your take on her decision to vote against it?
Well, first, Zack, thank you so much for having me. Good to see you. And we voted against $75 billion for hospitals. You heard her there, right? She claims she cares about hospitals, yet she voted against $75 billion for hospitals. She voted against $25 billion for testing. This is obviously about her trying to raise her national profile, her constant grandstanding, and she does that at the expense of the people she represents. I have been on the streets every day delivering masks for people out here, thousands and thousands of them who are out of work, and they are desperate to get back to work. They are desperate for this crisis to be over. And if she had actually looked in their eyes, she would know that she should have voted for that bill, as I would have, as Nancy Pelosi did. She constantly goes against everyone in the Democratic Party simply to be divisive and to raise her national profile. It's ridiculous and atrocious.
Yeah, it's an interesting move when we think about how complicated some of these things have become in terms of getting money passed. Inevitably, there's going to be winners and losers with some of these things, but it is interesting to note that states necessarily haven't seen funds to make up for their revenue losses, and that seems to be one of those issues that is a bit touchier than what we've seen passed so far, because Republicans and Democrats still seem pretty far apart on that front. What's your take on what more can be done? We heard from Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell talking about potentially states having to declare bankruptcy to get through this. It doesn't sound like that's exactly what Democrats, like the party you're going to be representing in this election, would want. So what's your take on how you make states whole here as they continue to see revenues fall?
Governor Cuomo has made very clear how desperate the state of New York is. And what struck me about my opponent as she was ranting on the floor of the House is she didn't bring up anything about helping the state that she's from, about helping Governor Cuomo with those very issues. Once again, she doesn't even get involved in ways that would help the party. I can tell you, Zack, that New York State needs help. Here in Queens, we have modern day bread lines, food pantries, and in these lines are people who used to do construction work, used to work in nail salons, did dry cleaning work, all cleaning ladies. These people desperately need help. And they are very, very scared about what the future holds. And when we hand out masks and food, they are grateful, but they want to know when this is coming to an end. And that's what my opponent should be focused on, is helping her constituents rather than ranting and raving like you saw her there. You know, when the last vote happened for the stimulus bill, did you know she didn't come home? She stayed in her luxury apartment in Washington, D.C. for a whole week with a Whole Foods in the lobby. So she couldn't see that there were lines down the street in Jackson Heights for people desperate to get groceries. This constant divisiveness not working for the people in her district. That's why she's not going to get reelected.
So, Michelle, I was listening to a press conference with AOC earlier this week, and the reason she said she wanted to vote against this bill is because it didn't do enough to help people if you were to win in the district that you would represent. 14th district here in New York is heavily immigrant, heavily Hispanic. So I'm wondering what you want to see in future stimulus bills to help communities like the one you are hoping to represent that are overwhelmingly immigrant and that are overwhelmingly minority communities.
I would be fighting harder to get more for New York like Governor Cuomo has asked, because the budget constraints that New York State is going to face means that Medicaid is going to suffer cuts. And that's health insurance for the poorest in the state. We also need more robust public health, because it's the public hospitals that were really, that have the lines out the doors, that serve immigrant communities. They really do need the help. That's the kind of thing I would be fighting for in the next round of bills. Remember when she votes against this bill, she's the only one. Why is that? To steal the headlines. It's not because she really cares. If she really cared, she would have come home after that last vote. If she really cared, she wouldn't drive away 25,000 jobs like she did. If she really cared, she wouldn't be telling the poorest people in her district not to go back to work like she did earlier this week. She's out of touch. To tell people who are desperate for food that they shouldn't go back to work, how out of touch can you be? She clearly hasn't talked to her constituents.
Michelle, I have a really quick question. Sorry to jump in, Zach. I just wanted to clarify. You said you wanted health care for a lot of the people in your community. I'm wondering if that also includes undocumented immigrants as well.
We need to help everyone here. We have to help everyone here, because when people get sick, they put pressure on the health system that we have. And we've always had care for everyone who's ever walked into a hospital. So yes, absolutely. If somebody walks into a hospital, doesn't matter where they're from, they absolutely need help. So we need more robust public health. Doesn't mean we need Medicare for all, by the way. Remember, Italy and Spain have Medicare for all, and thousands of people there died because they don't spend enough on public health. Just because they give insurance to everyone doesn't mean they give health care to everyone.
Again,
We've got to think about those two things.
Real quick, last question before we let you go here. Obviously, these are very strange times and no doubt impacting a bunch of campaigns across the country, not just the one that you'll be participating in here. Of course, you did raise $1 million earlier, and you reported that, but your opponent, AOC, is one of those that has been able to raise quite a bit of money, at one point raising more than anybody else in the House last year. So how is social distancing and the ability not to put on campaign events, maybe knock on people's doors, how has that made your job harder in going up against a pretty well-known incumbent?
Well, obviously, we're doing a lot more phone work, number one. And I would say that the focus of the campaign has really shifted, Zach, into helping people in our community here. So delivering food, delivering masks, making sure we can do everything possible to help, and also things that can keep them safe. And speaking directly to people over the phone. Remember, my opponent talks to Twitter, I talk to people. She and I couldn't be more different. The contrast is dramatic. I'm for jobs, she's against them. I'm for the people here, she's for herself. So keep that in mind when you think about the next stunt that she pulls on the floor of the House.
A very interesting battle shaping up here in New York's 14th district. But Michelle Caruso-Cabrera, thank you so much for joining us, and good luck out there.
Pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Hey investors, Zack Guzman here. Are you interested in learning more about the markets and getting the latest financial news? Well, then click right here to subscribe to our Yahoo Finance YouTube channel. Get the latest up-to-the-minute market analysis, big interviews in the world of finance, and information on how to manage your money every day wherever you are.